Have you ever wondered how much of what you know about ancient Egypt is actually true? Behind this ancient civilization lies so many secrets that some might even be more astonishing than what we believe today. Today, I'm going to share with you 50 insane facts from the depths of ancient Egypt, facts that have been considered mysterious and mind-blowing by historians and researchers for centuries. Get ready, because from the pyramids to the lives of the pharaohs, many unknown secrets are waiting for you. Fact 50. Historians have long debated whether King Tut met his end due to a hippo. The only thing we know for sure about the death of the frail King Tutankhamun is that he suffered a devastating leg injury that eventually led to his death from infection. But how did he get that broken leg? That's a mystery that has sparked fierce debates among historians. One peculiar theory is that King Tut may have fallen victim to a very hungry hippo while hunting. Paintings in his tomb depict him throwing a harpoon, which was commonly used in big game hunting in ancient Egypt. Egyptologists are free to continue arguing about this in the comments. Fact 49. Shepherd of the Anis was a real job title in ancient Egypt. This was the literal translation for what we now call proctologists. Herodotus, the ancient historian, documented Egyptian doctors specializing in specific medical fields as early as 450 BC. During his visit to Egypt, he observed specialists in various fields, such as eye doctors, stomach doctors, and even doctors of the tooth, who we would now refer to as dentists. Though it may not seem special today, the fact that medical practitioners in ancient Egypt specialized in particular fields highlights just how advanced their civilization was for its time. But some of their medical practices were a bit wild. We'll get to that later. Fact 48. Cleopatra wasn't even Egyptian, despite being one of the most famous figures of ancient Egypt today. Largely thanks to a certain British playwright named Shakespeare, Cleopatra VI was actually Greek Macedonian by descent. She was born in Alexandria, but she came from the family of Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's closest companions. From 323 to 30 BC, the Ptolemaic dynasty ruled Egypt and installed their own leaders. While Cleopatra wasn't culturally Egyptian, she made history as one of the first rulers of the dynasty to actually speak the Egyptian language. Fact 47. Ancient Egypt was ahead of its time when it came to women's rights. Unlike the anti-women culture of ancient Greece, where some even turned to same-sex relationships due to extreme misogyny, Egyptian women had the freedom to serve on juries, enter legal contracts, create wills, and buy and sell property. While not all women worked outside the home, those who did were paid equally to men. But that's not all. Ancient Egyptian couples could form prenuptial agreements, and women had the right to divorce and remarry with compensation if they brought money into the marriage. Fact 46. Ancient Egyptian workers were the first to go on strike. Long before labor movements like those led by Jimmy Hoffa, Egyptian workers knew how to demand fair treatment. In the 12th century BC, under Pharaoh Ramses Sira, workers building the royal necropolis at Deir el-Medina went on strike, refusing to work until they received the grain payments they demanded. This was especially impressive considering that pharaohs were revered as gods. Fact 45. Ancient Egyptians were passionate about board games. Pharaohs and everyday Egyptians alike were avid board gamers. They had collections of popular games like Mehen, Dogs and Jackals, and the classic Senet, which dates back to 3500 BC. There are even paintings of Queen Nefertari playing Senet, though sadly the exact rules of the game have been lost to history. Fact 44. Many ancient Egyptian pharaohs were actually overweight. Despite their svelte appearances in tomb paintings, The real pharaohs of ancient Egypt were often larger than life, living luxuriously on a diet of beer, wine, bread, and honey. In fact, many pharaohs, including Queen Hatshepsut, are believed to have had diabetes. Fact 43. Slaves didn't build the pyramids. Contrary to popular belief, the pyramids weren't built by enslaved workers. This myth, started by the Greek writer Herodotus, is now debunked by historians. Most of the labor was done by paid workers, who were so proud of their work that they left graffiti on the site, including nicknames like Friends of Khufu, Drunkards of Menkaure. Fact 42. Ancient Egypt was home to one of the world's first peace treaties. For over 2 centuries, Egypt and the Hittite Empire, which controlled modern-day Syria, were locked in conflict. In 1274 BC, after years of battle, Pharaoh Ramses II and Hittite King Hattusili I signed a historic peace treaty. This treaty is so important that it's displayed at the United Nations Security Council. Fact 41. Ancient Egyptians were passionate about makeup. It wasn't just for vanity. Makeup was believed to offer protection from gods like Horus and Ra. Coal, made from ground ores like malachite and galena, was applied using ivory bone or wood utensils. Though we can't say for certain if it worked as divine protection, it's believed that their lead-based makeup helped reduce eye infections. Fact 40. Ancient Egyptians loved domesticating animals. While most people know that Egyptians revered cats for their association with the goddess Bastet, they also adored animals like baboons, hawks, lions, ibises, and dogs. These animals even helped Egyptian police officers, serving as a sort of ancient canine unit. The Egyptians were so dedicated to their pets that they had them mummified and buried with them, ensuring they stayed with their owners in the afterlife. Fact 39. The Egyptians never actually rode camels. Despite camels being the iconic beasts of burden in both ancient and modern deserts, they weren't used in Egypt until after the age of the pharaohs. So, what did they use instead? The humble donkey. And with that in mind, we think the pharaohs would probably have been huge fans of Shrek. Fact 38. Not many ancient Egyptians were actually mummified. It's a shocking fact, considering how synonymous mummies are with ancient Egypt. However, the mummification process was incredibly intricate, and it was mostly reserved for the rich and powerful pharaohs and their inner circles. Most common Egyptians were buried in large, collective burial pits, which doesn't exactly have the romantic appeal of a classic mummy. But that's not the only strange thing the ancient Egyptians did with their dead. Fact 37. The ancient Egyptians liked dining with their dead. While thinking of deceased relatives might not usually spark an appetite, unless you're a cannibal, ancient Egyptians actually enjoyed sharing meals with the dearly departed. Families would bring food offerings to tomb chapels and present them to the Kai, or spirit, of their loved ones. Once the spirit symbolically consumed the food, the living relatives would eat it. This practice was especially common during the Feast of the Valley, an annual religious festival that honored the dead and celebrated life. Fact 36. It wasn't common to write in hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics are a defining feature of ancient Egypt, but these sacred symbols were only used for significant matters, decorating temples, tombs, and recording royal or divine stories. For daily writing, scribes used a simplified system called hieratic, which lacked the elaborate pictographs. Even then, literacy was rare, with only around 10% of the population being able to read and write. Fact 35. In ancient Egypt, women could be kings. In ancient Egypt, the term king wasn't inherently masculine. In fact, the word closest to queen actually meant king's wife. 3 women ruled as King Sobnufru, Hatshepsut, and Tosret, making them technically female kings, not queens. Fact 34. Cleopatra might not have been as beautiful as we think. The popular image of Cleopatra as a stunning beauty is likely a modern invention. Coins minted during her reign show her with more striking features, leading some to believe the portrayal we know may not reflect her true appearance, or just be a result of the artistic skills of ancient coin engravers. Fact 33. Some historians believe Cleopatra invented the first vibrator. It's often said that Cleopatra may have invented the world's first vibrator, which allegedly involved a hollowed-out gourd filled with angry bees. A risky method, but talk about high stakes for a good time. Fact 32. King Tut was the product of incest. King Tutankhamun, the famous pharaoh, had a notoriously frail and sickly body, and this was likely due to his parents being siblings. Incest was a common practice among royalty to maintain power and wealth, but it often resulted in rulers who were far from healthy. Fact 31. Ancient Egyptians invented a surprisingly accurate pregnancy test. Before modern pregnancy tests, Egyptians had a unique method. They would urinate on wheat and barley seeds, and depending on whether they sprouted, they could tell if a woman was pregnant. A study in the 1960s found the test was accurate 70% of the time, which is pretty impressive for something invented thousands of years ago. Fact 30. Ancient Egyptians had strange methods of contraception. To avoid pregnancy, women in ancient Egypt used a mix of crocodile dung, dove acacia, dates, and honey, some of which had spermicidal properties. When those methods failed, they used a herb called silphium to terminate pregnancies, which wasn't considered taboo at the time. Fact 29. Did you know that ancient Egyptians invented their own version of Playboy? Around 1500 BC, an Egyptian created what is now known as the Turin erotic papyrus. It's divided into two sections. One is the erotic section with 12 sexual vignettes between men and women, and the other features a comedy section where animals perform tasks that humans typically do. This bizarre mix of erotica and satire was ahead of its time, with some historians even dubbing it the world's first men's magazine. Just another incredible Egyptian innovation. Fact 28. The ancient Egyptians had the world's grossest toothpaste. As early as 5000 BC, Egyptians used a homemade toothpaste. However, we wouldn't recommend trying it. The mixture often included mire, ox hooves, water, pumice, and eggshells. This concoction was rubbed on the teeth and gums using the finger. Let's just stick to modern toothpaste, shall we? Fact 27. The River Nile was the key to ancient Egyptian civilization's success. Location is everything when it comes to flourishing societies, and the Nile provided everything Egypt needed. It was essential for drinking water, irrigation, and farming, and the fertile soil around it allowed Egyptians to grow their staple crops. The Nile even helped with sanitation by providing water for flushing toilets. Fact 26. Sometimes, the Egyptians' love for animals worked against them. In one notable historical event, the Persian king Cambyses used Egyptian reverence for animals to his advantage. According to the Macedonian historian Polyaenus, Cambyses placed sacred animals, like cats, in front of his army. The Egyptians, unwilling to harm these animals, halted their defenses, allowing Cambyses to capture Pelusium and pave the way for his conquest of Egypt. Fact 25. The ancient Egyptians saw lettuce as a sacred symbol of fertility. While lettuce doesn't scream sexy, to us, the Egyptians thought otherwise. They associated it with Min, the fertility god, seeing it as an aphrodisiac because it resembled a phallus. We're left wondering what kind of lettuce they were eating back then. Fact 24. One pharaoh had two gay chief manicurists. Kunhotep and Niankhnum were two men tasked with caring for Pharaoh Niuser's nails. They were buried together, with a mural in their tomb showing them intimately embracing. This close bond has led historians to speculate that their relationship was more than just professional. Fact 23. Ancient Egyptians used crocodile dung for exorcisms. The Egyptians were known for their love of magic, especially when it came to warding off evil spirits. One strange method involved using dung to lure out these spirits from possessed individuals. Conversely, sweet substances like honey were believed to repel demons. Maybe that's why Winnie the Pooh never got possessed. Fact 22. Ancient Egypt had a forgotten femboy, pharaoh. King Akhenaten, famously known as Nefertiti's husband, was practically erased from history. His push for monotheism made him unpopular with the religious elites. But his physical appearance also drew attention. Due to a rare genetic condition, he had a feminine body, including wide hips and breasts, yet was still virile, fathering 6 daughters. Fact 21. Ever wanted to curse someone, Egyptian style? Ancient Egyptians crafted curse dolls out of clay and papyrus to hex their enemies. The ritual involved aggressively destroying the doll and then soaking it in urine to dissolve the bad vibes. A strange, but certainly intense, method to get your revenge. Fact 20. Cleopatra and Mark Antony had a secret drinking club. Cleopatra wasn't just a ruler, she was also a party enthusiast. She created an exclusive club, called the Inimitable Livers, for those who shared her love for debauchery. Some believe it was a tribute to Dionysus, the Greek god of revelry, while others think Cleopatra and Mark simply loved a good drink. Fact 19. Did you know that ancient Egyptians invented sunscreen as early as 3100–3000 BC? While modern sunscreen is all about UV protection, the Egyptians used it as more of a beauty secret. They adored pale skin, so after bathing, they would apply rice to shield themselves from the sun's rays, along with jasmine and lupine to keep their skin glowing. Unfortunately, we'll never know if this practice helped reduce sunburns or skin cancer in ancient Egypt. Fact 18. King Tut was buried with a truly extraordinary weapon, an iron-bladed ceremonial dagger. And what's so special about this? Well, during King Tut's time, the Bronze Age, iron was extremely rare. Researchers now believe his dagger was made from a meteorite. That's one out of this world weapon. Fact 17. Now, this one is a little awkward. When King Tut's tomb was first discovered, his body was found with his penis in a very unnatural position. It had been preserved in black oil, with his heart removed. Why was this done? The goal was to make him resemble the god Osiris, in hopes of preventing a religious revolution that his father had initiated. Sadly, Tut's final moments weren't quite so regal. His manhood was broken off during grave robbing. Fact 16. Here's a twist. Philadelphia's name has its roots in Egyptian incest. Ancient Egyptian royalty often married within the family to keep the bloodline pure, earning them the Greek nickname Philadelphoi. This term inspired both the ancient city of Philadelphia and the modern U.S. city, with Philadelphia meaning the city of brotherly love. A bit of a dark origin for such a sweet name, right? Fact 15. Ever notice that Egyptian pharaohs are depicted with long, braided beards? Well, those beards were actually fake. Pharaohs were usually clean-shaven, but they wore these artificial beards to mimic the god Osiris. Even female pharaohs like Hatshepsut rocked these beards, making quite a statement. Fact 14. The Great Pyramids of Egypt might not be the world's largest pyramids. That title belongs to the Great Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico. which covers a much larger surface area than the Great Pyramid of Giza. But don't worry. Egypt's pyramid still wins the height competition, standing 71 meters, so 232 feet taller than its Mexican counterpart. Fact 13. The Egyptians didn't actually enslave the Israelites. While the Bible's book of Exodus suggests they did, there's no solid historical evidence to support this claim. Most scholars agree that it's more of a myth. However, the pharaohs did have slaves, often from captured enemies or poor families who sold their children. Fact 12. Ancient Egyptian interrogation methods. Brutal. The police didn't exactly believe in gentle questioning. Suspects were often beaten mercilessly, with rods to force them to confess. Fact 11. The artisans who worked on royal tombs in Deir el-Medina suffered from an unusual illness. Many of them had osteoporosis in their ankles and knees, but not in their hands and wrists. It turns out the strain was from carrying their heavy tools up to the tombs, not from their actual work. Fact 10. Dental health wasn't great in ancient Egypt. A study of 800 ancient Egyptian teeth revealed that 90% were so worn down that the pulp was exposed. This led to painful dental issues like cysts, abscesses, and jaw osteoarthritis. Why? They couldn't keep sand out of their food, and the gritty particles caused irreversible damage to their teeth. Fact 9. The ancient Egyptians were remarkably progressive when it came to disabilities. Archaeological discoveries from Deir el-Medina show that people born with disabilities, such as missing limbs or dwarfism, were able to live long, fulfilling lives in roles that were adapted to their needs. Unlike societies that came later and stigmatized disabilities, ancient Egypt was notably inclusive centuries. Before eugenics became a dark chapter in history, people with disabilities could take on roles such as artisans, entertainers, or overseers, which kept them away from manual labor. Fact 8. Almost everyone in ancient Egypt was bald. It wasn't just the beards that were fake. If you've ever seen those iconic tomb paintings of workers with shaved heads and pharaohs adorned with elaborate headdresses, you may be surprised to know that it wasn't all about fashion. Lice were such a persistent issue that going bald was a practical solution. Rather than dealing with lice infestations, many people, including women, wore wigs as a necessity. Fact 7. Ancient Egyptians were frequent laxative users. To maintain their health and slim figures, Egyptians would take castor oil-based laxatives 3 days each month. Considering the lack of plumbing in those days, this wasn't a very clean affair. Even more bizarrely, they used laxatives to treat diarrhea, which probably just made the situation worse. Fact 6. The ancient Egyptians believed that men menstruated too. A common illness, schistosomiasis, caused symptoms like nausea and blood in the urine and stool. It was so widespread that Egyptians mistakenly thought men experienced periods, just like women, attributing the blood in urine and stool to menstruation. Fact 5. Ancient Egypt lasted so long that Cleopatra lived closer to modern times than to the building of the pyramids. Fact 4. The ancient Egyptians thought the heart was the center of all thought, and the brain was completely useless. This is why, during mummification, the heart was preserved and kept inside the body for use in the afterlife, while the brain was simply discarded after being pulled out through the nose. Fact 3. Ancient Egyptian currency was often based on bread, grain, and beer. Bread and beer weren't just staple foods, they were vital to Egypt's economy and religion. When crops from the Nile flourished, bread and beer were abundant. Workers were paid in these essentials, and offerings to gods were made. Fact 2. Let's talk about canopic jars. These jars played a crucial role in mummification. There were 4 distinct jars: each representing a direction and protected by a different goddess. The jars were modeled after the 4 sons of Horus Hapi, Duamutf, Imsiti, and Kibasanuif, and each one held a different organ for protection: the lungs, stomach, liver, and intestines. Fact 1. Ancient Egyptian women had to decay for a few days before they were embalmed. Why? Authorities didn't fully trust embalmers with fresh female corpses. A rather bizarre and dark practice from the ancient world. Which fact surprised you the most? Got any we missed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new video. Your support helps us keep bringing you more amazing content. Thanks for watching.